Construction of the wooden vault. The construction started with us dropping the dry logs. The tools required for cutting down the dry dead trees are a chainsaw, heavy-duty digging solid metal rod to use as a lever to lift the heavy logs, an axe to cut the side branches as cleaner, smoother logs are easier to pull out. Please note that the wooden arches do not have to be placed on the wooden logs. In this case, it was the quickest and cheapest way to create walls as the house was submerged with a low water table situation. My own wooden vault I will be placing on super adobe walls designed in a snake-like fashion to create stability for outwards thrust that the arches will exert. I will explain this type of wall creation later in the course when we cover the Brazilian hyper adobe build. When dropping the trees, I would recommend to invite a professional for at least the first day to get the hang of this if you've never done it before. Dropping trees with a chainsaw is a useful skill if you live in a forest or if you have an abundance of trees. I'm not a pro with cutting trees down, but it is important to follow these basic rules of thumb. First, observe the tree from all angles to guesstimate where it will fall. You do not want to be standing from the side where the tree will be leaning towards. 2. Do not work in windy conditions, as it can alter where the tree will fall. 3. A triangle wedge gets cut out from the side of the trunk where the tree is leaning towards. 4. Slowly make a cut from the other side. It is always best if you have someone else to help you pushing the tree towards the direction of its lean. The axe or chainsaw is used to get the side branches off. I would recommend getting a chainsaw crash course from a pro just so you can get the hang of it if you never worked with a chainsaw before. The tree needs to be close enough so your strong steel cable is long enough to tie a loop around the one end of the tree so you can pull it out. Alternatively, you can use a winch that pulls cars out. I would recommend a good quality one with a long cable versus a cheapy one. It might be better off to rent a strong winch than to buy a terrible one that'll break in the first day. Depending on the length and the diameter of the logs, you might need to cut it into pieces to reduce the weight in order to be able to pull them out. The pieces should not be smaller than your planned length of walls. I would recommend adding at least an extra foot just in case the ends are split and need to be trimmed a little. Because we only used dry dead logs, some of them were rotten. We still pulled those out and cut them into firewood chunks. To test whether the log is rotten, try driving an axe into it. If it goes right in, you have your answer. Not a good building material. But it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect wood in mint condition either. Thus you get two products from one resource. Building material in the form of logs and plenty of firewood from offcuts and rotten logs. Generally, the ones that are standing upright are dry and good enough. It is when the logs are lying on wet earth that they're susceptible to rot. If you're only planning to build one structure and you never use a chainsaw, I would recommend getting a person so you can work with him side by side. If you live next to a forest, then it makes sense to learn the skill yourself and possibly investing into a mill if you're planning to do loads of building. The heavy-duty digging bar is used to lift the log slightly so the steel cable loop can be placed around the one side of the trunk. Working alone takes much longer, but it is possible. For example, after you lift the log with the metal bar, you could kick in a wooden wedge underneath in order to tie a loop. Once the steel cable is connected to a trunk of a tree, we use the 4x4 vehicle to pull the logs out. Alternatively, you can use a winch that's connected to a car or another tree. It is not a difficult process, and once you get the hang of it, 2 people in one day can cut down, clean up, and pull out 6 tree trunks. Once the logs are out, they can be cleaned with a hand tool called a draw knife. Try various ones in the shop and read some testimonials. A good quality tool makes all the difference. Try not to skimp on quality if you're planning to use it often. Stronger steel, good angle for the hands, rounded blade versus straight. I recommend going to the tool yard to try 2 to 3 different types, trying to actually clean the wooden bark, if that's a possibility. Some will peel much easier due to the surface area of the blade that touches the wood surface with a rounded blade, and thus it are easier to pull with your strength level. Some jab into the wood, or you need more muscle power as they clean the bark faster, the ones with a straight blade. Make sure that the blade is sharp, as it is quicker and easier to clean up a tree. Leaving bark on the tree will result in tree rot. Another tool that we used for cleaning the logs is an attachment to a chainsaw. We made a mistake of not disconnecting the oil pump from the chainsaw. It channels the oil via a tube to a chain bar. Our belt, being slippery, tore in the first use. Please read the instructions before installing such a tool on your chainsaw. I would recommend cleaning up all the necessary logs and then removing the attachment from your chainsaw, as you will need your chainsaw for the woodwork. If you're not using logs for walls, all other woodwork for this particular method of vault construction can be done without a chainsaw. We did not apply anything to the logs before placing them into the ground, as long as the earth is dry. What makes the tree rot is constant alternation between wet and dry conditions. The online research states that untreated wood will rot after 1 to 3 years in the earth. Collier's home has been built in the same method with untreated wood, and it is standing for 11 years without any sign of deterioration. Dry earth is key. The vertical trunk that we used as supports to hold the walls from falling inwards were dug even deeper in the earth, and those were firstly burned and then liquid smoke was applied to them. It is a term used for a liquid that comes out of a side of a chimney. Collier made a small gutter that catches this liquid straight out of the side of the chimney. I believe the term is called wooden tar. It does not have to be creosote. It does have some creosote, but it's not the same, and it does not smell the same as creosote. It smells like smoke that's used for smoking the meat. Commercial creosote has very strong nasty smell. For the vertical support trunks, I would recommend an asphalt hot tar for the bottom 60 centimeters or 2 feet, or 50 centimeters or 20 inches of the poles are in the ground, and the other 10 centimeters 4 inches just in case are above the edges of the hole. This method is 100% waterproof, incredibly durable, and does not smell. These vertical support logs might be prone to standing in water. The bashing of the rocks method that is shown in this video to stabilize the upright poles will remove a layer of tar here and there where the rocks scratch against the logs. If you're using the bashing of rocks method to stabilize the poles, then use the burning method that is shown right now. Alternatively, with the hot tar method, I would recommend stabilizing the poles with concrete. It is a method I used in my outdoor shower. The remaining logs for the walls we did not treat at all, only the ones right at the top. Collier treated a little from the top and slightly on the side, as these top logs are half in the air and half in the earth. If you do decide to treat the logs, you need to do your research. Although I want to let you know that please do not apply anything toxic. In South Africa, I tried to go all organic and natural by applying flaxseed oil on my newly built deck, and it rotted in 5 years. It was, however, standing in outdoor full African sun as well as the rain. Our situation here is vastly different. Your wall logs can be treated with copper sulfate that diluted in water. We use it on top of the wooden struts just before the waterproofing layer. The same method can be used for the side logs. I would recommend to treat the logs first prior to placing them down as walls. Key is to keep the earth dry by extending the roof 1 to 1.5 meters or 3 to 5 feet past the submerged home. If necessary, to lower the water table, do a French drain or trench, which we'll discuss later on. As we're learning about this particular method, it is important to mention that we were at least 50 meters or 150 feet above the water table. Thus, water was not a problem for us at all. Logs positioned in dry earth can provide at least 11 plus years. Upright support poles. The 4 upright poles were absolutely necessary to hold the side poles from falling inwards and to support the front wall. To install the 4 upright poles, we dug out 4 holes of 60 centimeters deep or 2 feet and 50 by 50 centimeters wide, 20 by 20 inches. The treated upright logs were placed on a bed of stones or gravel about 4 inches or 10 centimeters to make sure that they're not standing in the wet clay. Large rocks with a tiny bit of clay or without are hammered to compress and compact the logs. Make sure that you don't put more than 5 to 8% clay, just to glue the stones a little, but the hammered and rammed stones are what providing the actual strength. Once compacted, it is best to use a specific stone that will act as a wedge and compress everything else stronger. Do not dump a whole lot of stones at one time. Take good care when pounding rocks. Do a small bit at a time. By the time you're done, the upward logs should be rock solid and unmovable. You can use the same heavy-duty digging bar if you have a little foot welded on one end. to ram them, otherwise a sledgehammer or any large hammer will work. And B, use goggles to make sure the pieces of stones will not damage your eyes. The next step is to apply temporary diagonal supports to the upright poles. These make sure that the logs will not pull the upright poles inwards. At a later stage, the tension wire will go in place, but until then, these horizontal diagonal support struts are a must. Our building conditions were unfavorable. We often had cold rain mixed with snow, and it swamped our building site and even drenched these holes. We had to scoop the water out by hand and even considered buying a pump to do the job. Getting those arches up and covering the building site with plastic is #1 priority. Alternatively, if too much heat and sun is an issue, using a tarp is a good idea. I will share how we covered a massive building site in Brazil during the site prep lesson later on. Once the vertical support logs with their diagonal struts were installed, we prepared the ground to accept the cleaned up logs for the walls. There needs to be a clear way for these to slide in. The briefing part is very important. The one person stands with the digging bar from one side and the other person from the other side to make sure that the log does not fall in prematurely into the ground. The dropping of the logs were done using heavy-duty digging bars as well as the ropes in the way that's shown in the video. It is not a difficult process and you do not have to be strong to do it. It's not a muscle thing but coordination of efforts and timing. The ropes were used to make sure that both sides drop simultaneously. Once each log dropped into the ground between the upright support poles, we compressed the earth. The tools that can be used for that are a sledgehammer, a stomper, or anything custom you make on your own. When digging the soil out of the hole of your submerged home, I would not recommend throwing it right next to the sides. We had to spend some time cleaning the clay out to prepare a clear way to pull in the logs. If you're going to be using a car, then you need to make sure that you have clear ground without stumps, stones, or sharp objects in the pathway of the vehicle, so you can get the logs in. If you can't drive around, then you will have to use a winch. Make sure a winch is strong enough with long steel cable. With tools, my rule of thumb, always get stronger than needed and good quality. We didn't use a winch, so I cannot comment. Please do your own research if you're going to be using the winches to pull logs out of the forest and into your building site. I've seen winches that connect to a 220 volt using a generator. It might be a more viable solution than running with a car battery all over the place and then running out of power. On the other hand, a 12 volt winch can double up and thereafter be used to pull your car out of any muddy conditions. Weigh up the odds and know the climate and thy conditions. And I'm clearing this entire trench for the logs, so all of the soil shouldn't be here. That needs to be all removed. So next time put a log like that and then put the soil on the other side of the log so this stays clear. Planning a whole process in your head first is really helpful. Visualizing how will the logs get to where they need to be in your walls will help you foresee any possible obstructions. Alternatively, you can always hire a small crane and lower the logs one by one. Each site is different. Activate your creativity and believe in yourself. Safety is priority as always. In a full working day, you can do all 6 logs, 3 on each side. The ends of the logs should alternate as the diameter is larger on one side of each log. Placing the wider sides of the logs all on top of each other will result in a wall that is far from level. The front logs are done slightly differently according to Collier's super cheap method. Because front side is more prone to water, the bottom logs get encased in plastic from the bottom, the back, and the top, i.e. all sides that touch earth. The other logs also get a plastic waterproofing layer that separates them from the earth. They stay open towards the house in order to dry up in the warm room. Please do not encase the entire log in plastic, as any condensation that will form inside will not have a way to get out. Also important to mention is the condensation. It forms when two drastically different temperatures are present from both sides, super cold outside and warm inside. I would recommend doing an insulation skirt to make sure that the earth that touches the logs is also warm and doesn't have this huge step in temperature. We did not do this as the earth gradually warms up and doesn't have this sharp jump in temperature as the whole house is buried. In future, I would recommend doing some form of footing for all the walls, even just one row of earth bags. This way, the logs are guaranteed not to absorb any moisture from the earth, as they will not be touching the earth. It obviously all depends on your moisture condition of your soil, which should be kept dry once again. One could even just dig a little trench and fill it with gravel, and then your sandbag will go on top of it. This trench will divert any excess water away. We will discuss the practical aspects of lowering the water table and diverting the water away later on in the course. These methods will be prototyped in the very near future, and video lessons will be updated with this footage. My other recommendation would be to layer down a layer of plastic about 2 feet longer than your side log and then staple it gently to the sides before dropping the logs in. So therefore you'll be able to fold it over at the bottom up to the floor level and on top up to the level where the arches can plug in. So therefore there is no contact with the soil and the logs. The logs for the front wall had to be rolled up the earthen hump that we dug out. With 4 people and 2 ropes, it makes this job doable. 2 people are pulling with 2 ropes connected that are looped over the arches and the logs, and 2 people used the heavy-duty digging rods. We did use the arches to hook to in order for the logs not to roll back and to assist with spooling them upwards. The front and back walls only need to be positioned in place once the arches are up, as they're not load-bearing. Therefore, we'll come back to them later on. The 2 heavy-duty digging rods were a must during the entire process, working with logs. They helped us to lock the logs to make sure it does not roll back, use them as a lever to align the logs forwards and backwards once they are down between the earth and the upright poles, to turn the logs so they're positioned more snug, less skew and perfect in comparison to previous log.
So we're trying to turn the log because of that massive hole there.
To lift the logs up once in a trench in order to shave away humps and bumps. This is a very specific super low cost and super low tech method of construction that did not use an ounce of cement. In the next lesson, I will share how we bend the arches and install them in the walls.